can be only one podcast, and may it be the Prince of the Universe. Hi, folks. I'm Matt.
And I'm Wes.
And I'm a different universe?
No. Hey.
Hey.
How you doing?
Well, I was hanging out one Saturday morning, and I found a Samo flange, and I put my darn foot on it, and I ended up out here.
You did. That's what happens when worlds collide.
Somewhere in a different universe.
This is like a comic book crossover.
I love it.
It's funny because we haven't had you cross over. Benjamin has crossed over.
Yeah.
But we haven't had you crossed over. It's like you and I were the same person. That's why we couldn't be in the same room on Prince of the Universe together, but for some reason Saturday Morning Sandflange was okay.
Well, like in Time Cop, the same matter can't, hold the same space at the same time.
Wow.
So
Time
we're
Cop.
probably going to implode soon.
Wow.
Hi, Mikey.
Wow. All right, Mikey.
Thank you for letting me be here. I'm grateful.
Well, thanks for being here this time. No school lockdowns.
No, yes, no.
We don't have to tell the story, but
We are good.
all right.
We are good.
All right, good deal. Because we missed you last time, did some wrestling, had some good discussions.
We had to carry the show without you.
We did.
Well, it's in good hands. I can tell.
And now I'm excited. Fans are excited that we're talking about wrestling again. This time, Wes was the one who came up with the topic there of a good pay-per-view with a bad main event. And we're going to go with our top three, not in any order, by the way. This is not Samoflan, so we'll do it a little bit differently here. And Wes, I'll have you start, if you don't mind.
I was going to say WrestleMania 25, with the main event being Triple H versus Randy Orton. Because the rest of the card, you had John Cena defeating Edge and Big Show in a three-way. You had Undertaker against Shawn Michaels. And then you had Matt and Jeff Hardy. You had the Legends match with Jericho against Piper, Steamboat, and Snuka. And you had a Money in the Bank match with CM Punk.
And all of them were excellent.
And that main event was flat.
Really?
Well, here's
Flat.
the deal. Yes, I don't know if y'all spoke with the time that I couldn't be here about the ones that I sent you, but my favorite match of all time, and I am a lifelong wrestling fan, is Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker at WrestleMania 25. I
Yes.
think it has everything
We
I
did
ever
read that.
wanted.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Like, to follow that masterpiece,
But the match was not good.
it wasn't.
Like, it was just...
Both of them just laid an egg. in the
Yeah, it
ring.
just...
Wow.
I don't think it was necessarily the crowd, because I could just remember
Well,
watching
the crowd
it
should be at an all-time high after
and going,
seeing
there's
these
no
other matches.
blood, there's no nothing. Like, this is just flat. Very, very flat.
Wow.
Randy Orton is an interesting one to me because I do like Randy Orton. I actually think he's probably gotten a little better with age. I don't know if I liked him as much during this time. How do you feel, Matt, when hearing...
Was he still the legend killer at
Kinda at that
WrestleMania
time.
25?
Yeah.
Was he still that
Yes,
guy?
yes.
I mean,
Well, how do you feel about Triple H is what I was going to ask, because I know that's your favorite wrestler.
I
of all
love
time,
Triple
so to
H.
hear him in a flat main event.
everyone can fall apart. You got these two people, their chemistry in the ring is just not matching up, or something gets off on the wrong track, and then the whole match goes down. I can't remember who was it, but someone I can't remember whose autobiography said that a lot of it rests on how those first few minutes go, and if you don't turn that ship around, everything could just slowly start falling apart, because you start thinking about maybe it's Bret Hart's book, I can't remember, because he's talking about the how to work the match and everything, and you've got to let things go. If you slip up, you mess. Okay, keep going, but it just kind of, if it hits you in your mind, like a ice skater makes that first mistake. They know they've lost a few points, but then they let it get to them, and they get worse and worse.
Or it's, let's say, like you're on stage and you're sitting around like a half of a card table with some of your buddies, and then one of them pulls out like some cards with some naked pictures on it, and they really try to trip you up. Something happens right in the first 10 minutes of the show.
That's right.
You just gotta suck it up and then just keep going.
Spew beer in their face. That's what you got to do.
Oh, I forgot about that part.
That's great.
So Randy Orton really needed to spew beer.
That's
in
exactly
Triple H's
right.
face,
That's
and it
exactly
might have
right.
Just changed everything.
Yeah, but anyway, though. Okay, so both agree that was a bad one.
I do agree with that a lot.
I thought it
Okay.
was just... It was terrible.
All right.
Terrible.
Yeah. And that's a shame, because both of those are definitely main eventers, so they deserve to be there and headline.
I didn't realize Triple H was your favorite wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I buried him on the last podcast.
That's fine. That's fine. No, that's fine. He's a different man now
He is.
than he was
He's kinda
back
like
then.
me.
I mean, no one worked harder than the game back in the day when he was on top of. I think he worked hard. He dedicated himself. Yeah.
After the Click incident, like he's the one that took the brunt of that. He got buried.
Yeah.
He had to like bring himself back. I think Sean leaving and then him, becoming the head of DX certainly helped a lot.
Yeah.
Him finding his own name.
But he grew out of DX, and I think he became a really good player.
Right.
Really good wrestler. Yeah, one of my faves. Yeah. Terrible biography, though. More of a workout novel than, hey, here's what you eat. Here's how you work out. Okay, well, just call it your workout novel. Don't call it The Life and Times of Triple H, whatever it was called.
Didn't read it.
Yeah, I did, because it's Triple H. But anyway, all right, so what's yours?
So it's actually pretty close to yours.
Oh.
And I'm going to pull up some notes here because while I remember certain aspects of probably almost every pay-per-view, like going back and looking at an entire card, it's getting more and more difficult in my mind. So some of this is going to seem blasphemous a little bit because of who's in the main event, but I guess it's kind of similar to what you just said.
Well, I mean, if you're in a main event, you should be big time, at least at the time.
Well, this person is big time. All right, so for me, it's WrestleMania 33, and the main event there was Roman Reigns versus The Undertaker. I really did not like that match at all. At the time, I did not like Roman Reigns at all.
No one did.
I do actually really like him now and respect him because he spent years earning that respect. That's a different story for a different time. But while The Undertaker it's hard to say a bad thing about The Undertaker and his longevity and what he has meant to the business and just his performer, his character. But at that time, it was over. To me, it was just far past over. I thought that match was very lackluster. It showed just how old he was, how broken down he was.
I think it was more reflective on how he couldn't carry.
That's right.
He can't carry a main event no more.
No,
Yeah,
he couldn't at
he
that
could.
time.
Yeah,
and
he
Reigns wasn't good enough at that time to help him.
Right.
Right,
So
to make him look good.
Now I think Reigns could because the Elimination Chamber with Sami Zayn. Once again, I digress, but man, that was a fantastic match through and through. Just the one from a couple weeks ago.
Well, Roman Reigns is the king of stalling now. He doesn't do much.
Oh, really?
He is slow. I mean, it's like a 1970s heel. Working with the old lady.
He's like the William Regal, working the old arm wrench and the old...
facial expressions and everything. It is slow paced.
Wow. Slow burn on that man.
Yeah.
I like that because that's what I grew up liking. And even though I respect a good worker, my favorite wrestler of all time, Shawn Michaels, I respect people that can sell the crap out of stuff. I miss Kurt Hennig. I miss, your Eddie Guerreros, your Benoit's.
Oh, yeah.
But these big dudes that, the Rocks, the Hogans, the Ultimate Warriors, no, they're not good wrestlers. But, I mean, when it comes to the entertainment part of it, they got it. And I think Roman Reigns finally found a spot. But this match, he just wasn't good at that time. The Undertaker was broken down. And the rest of the card, just to say... briefly why I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it was like the best in the world. But it did have AJ Styles versus Shane McMahon. I love AJ Styles a lot. I've always thought Shane McMahon worked a lot harder than most people.
He did.
And really earned his
respect with the fans. Yeah.
I did like the fatal four-way between Bayley, Charlotte Flair, Nia Jax, and Sasha Banks. I don't like Nia Jax, but I do like Bayley a lot. This one did have the fatal four-way tag team ladder match with the Hardy Boys and Luke Gallows and Anderson, Cesaro and Sheamus. And back when Enzo and Big Cass were there, I liked Enzo a lot more than most people. I thought he had a good presence on the mic. And then it had the Seth Rollins versus Triple H match, which was all right. Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg, which I can't stand Goldberg, but I like seeing him get squashed because I love Lesnar.
There you go.
And I will say this: there was they call it the six-pack challenge, but there was a six-man female match for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and they finally let Naomi win. And while I'm not the biggest Naomi fan in the world, I thought she deserved it. She worked her butt off, and so it was a pretty.
So you're saying it was leading up to a good night,
yeah.
Regardless, because you hate Goldberg, but he got smashed. Now you're happy,
right?
Okay,
and then,
got it.
And then you would think, I mean, when the Undertaker is in the main event, something good is going to happen, but it just wasn't.
Okay, all right, good pick. Next one.
So my next is Halloween Havoc 1998, which could be called a co-main event because the championship did go on last. It was Goldberg against Dallas Page. But the real main event was the return of the Warrior against Hogan.
Do you recall? I know this one.
I watched it live.
I know this one.
So we have those two matches.
We had a common friend who was all about the One Warrior Nation. Do you remember this?
Vaguely.
Brandon.
I thought Brandon was more Sting.
But no, the Ultimate Warrior is back. He was all in.
Okay.
All in the ring on this one. I know he was so excited about watching this match.
But the matches before that were Bret Hart against Sting, Kevin Nash against Scott Hall, Steiner Brothers against each other. Or it was Buff and Rick against Scott. So anyway, it was just wasn't it wasn't a great undercard, but the main event with Hogan and Warrior for all of that,
which
hope
we should
so bad. It's probably
I don't know of anything that was hyped up more at the time.
It wasn't.
I mean, that was hyped up. That was like
Return of the
that
Ultimate
that
Warrior?
dominated Nitro every night.
Yeah.
Warrior Hogan, Warrior Hogan, Warrior Hogan.
But all those vignettes at the time were so weird because they had him like behind the mirror, like staring at.
I was thinking about that,
But
and Hogan going crazy.
Looking at the research on it, I just got a kick out of Horace Hogan as part of the run-in. And it's just like, man, anybody that thinks any Hogan in any kind of main event is going to be a good idea. It's just not a good idea.
Now, that was where the Diamond Dallas Page Goldberg match got cut off because they went over.
Right, and Goldberg knocked himself out, gave himself a concussion.
So totally mismanaged.
So he was loopy the whole match.
Yeah. So
More so than normal.
But that he was in the ring with Diamond Dallas Page.
And it was probably Goldberg's one of his best matches overall because Dallas, was paint by numbers with him and he could figure it out.
Yeah. We got to see the match on Nitro the next night. I remember we were working together at the store. And you said, hey.
Just that terrible WCW stuff. They just...
Yeah. But they wanted something to go up against Raw that night, and they did. They won the night, I remember, because they played that.
Killing your consumer credibility by buying a pay-per-view and then giving away the next night.
The very next night.
Anybody that bought that.
Just because you want to beat the numbers.
And you want to say, well, we ran long. Really?
Yeah, but then it's total mismanagement.
WCW pay-per-views were infamous for going off early. They rarely ran long. Rarely.
Whose fault was that, by the way? I remember something.
Whoever's timing that
show.
The
Rise and Fall of WCW was talking about, that book was talking about
I mean, you've got somebody whoever's running the truck and whoever's running that timing out the show.
Didn't say, hey.
You should not be ending the show 7 minutes early or running off 7 minutes late.
Yeah. Wow.
It's amazing to me that they would even do that on a pay-per-view. I don't know the ins and outs of all that, but one would think that, hey, you're going to go as long as you need to, which means that was probably done on purpose.
Well, back in the day, you bought it wouldn't happen today's time, I don't think. But back in the day, you bought that block.
Yeah, it was It was a hard out. You had a hard out. Yeah,
you bought a block,
because
and that was it. It cut off because it had someone else is buying the next
I guess
block.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It could be Girls Gone Wild up next. Who knows?
And probably was.
We can only hope.
No, it wasn't because he didn't watch the rest of it. He turned off the pay-per-view after that.
That's what I got a concussion from.
All right, what's your second one?
So I really, really, really perked up there for a minute because my second one is...
Was the Girls Gone Wild?
Well...
No, pay-per-view was this.
I would have been perked up for more than a second. Mine is Halloween Havoc 1997.
Whoa!
Just 1 year before.
What?
Because this main event was Hogan versus Piper in a steel cage match. And it was bubkiss, like all the way through.
It was what Cornette infamously called age in the cage.
Age in the cage. That's
Age
right.
in the cage.
Yeah, because it was like some sort of submission thing, and it was just, as much as Piper was a good thing 10 years before that, 15 years before that, by that time.
And he had a good match with Hogan at Starrcade, but that was it.
Yeah, and the rest of this card, I'll read it to you here. You had, and this is one of the things that I loved about WCW is the just strangeness of it. And in a Las Vegas sudden death match, I don't even remember what that meant. You had Macho Man versus DDP. You had Lex Luger versus Scott Hall that had 6 in his corner. You had Kurt Hennig versus Ric Flair. You had Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero for the Cruiserweight.
Oh, wow.
It was a mask match, so that's a great match. So
that's awesome.
Any of those matches back in the day with those Cruiserweights, I mean, it
were
was like
great.
the same 6 people, but they always entertained. They really worked and made each other better. And it had Ultimo Dragon actually showed up at this one. So for me, it was a pretty good WCW card at the time, but man, that ending, it was just, I mean, it was getting towards the late 90s, and it was in that era where, like, okay, in 94, 95, and 96, when WCW bought up all the old guys, they really thought they had something. But when you get into 97, 98, and then DX, and then Stone Cold,
it really shows their age.
Rock, and then Bret Hart's heel turn before he went to WCW, it really showed, like this old is going out fast.
The 2 things that stand out about the
old,
Hogan
that was
match
new is old again.
with Piper, other than it being just like they were in sand trying to work with each other, there's a fan that climbs the cage, and the camera stays on him because I think that the people weren't sure if this is some fake Sting.
Oh no, really?
And
I don't remember.
that
time that just happened with fake Stings and fake Stings.
But before that, Savage climbs all the way to that big cage, and it's like the old WWF Big Blue cage where you could really climb it, and he double axe handles. I think he's trying to hit Piper, but he hits Hogan. But Savage comes off the top of the cage. It was fearless. Savage, no wonder he was so beat up. But man, that spot of his old ass flying down, and then all of them just beating that poor fan up who got in the ring, and somebody didn't know it was a real fan because they were on it too much. Usually when there's a fan, they get off that shot.
Wow.
Well, the famous.
So they didn't know what was going on
at the beach. I have a lot of old. I have pretty much every old pay-per-view that you could ever think of, and I had to search long and hard to find one that was the actual broadcast footage of the guy running in the ring, and then Hall just kicking him right in the head, and because they cut away from that on the broadcast big time, they don't show that anymore at all.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah,
All
Halloween Havoc 97. Ugh.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. All right. Last one, Wes.
Well, I was torn between 2. So I wanted to say Starrcade 97 just because of how terrible that main event was between Hogan and Sting, and how it was really the first nut shot to WCW going forward before they totally botched Bret Hart, but who was part of that also. But I'm going to go with Hell in a Cell 2019, which was Rollins against The Fiend in the main event.
I remember the
And this
Fiend.
is when the lights were red in the cape.
Right.
And it was terrible because it ended in basically like a disqualification. It did, by the referee stopped it, which made no sense in this Hell in a Cell, and you could tell the crowd was just like, what happened? Like it was like they almost went off because someone was injured, but it wasn't that. It just had a really, really flat ending. So to me, I remember watching that live, and we were just kind of like, that's it. Like we were kind of thinking, is somebody going to run in? Is something about to happen?
Yeah.
Like, but that was,
You don't just stop a match and end the pay-per-view that
right.
way.
And I know that's very current, and it's not a huge, but it was
Oh, yeah.
just terrible. And Becky against Sasha, which was, of course, good. You had Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns versus Rowan and Harper. And then you had Charlotte defeated Becky. So you had talented people in that undercard that are still, some of them still stars. But that main event was so bad. And I know this is when you had the network, so it wasn't like you spent $50, but you just wait.
Still, though, it's a
You
pay-per-view.
spend
You
3
got to have
hours,
some pride. Yeah.
3 hours plus now because they run so long, and you go, man, this sucked.
They run so long.
No, even though now that's a good point. Even though it's not the pay-per-view we now know, it should still keep its status of, hey, this is special. This is don't miss.
It's
right
not like
here.
that. Oh my gosh, it's not like that. Like I really wish they would go back to 4. You know, and say what you will about AEW, not you, because I really don't know how you feel about AEW. But at least the fact that they have just 4 big ones a year and a couple of little special things here and there. I miss the day. It's oversaturated. When there's a pay-per-view every month, nobody cares. There's no stakes.
AEW can't time their shows either. They're 5 hours long.
Yeah, like we went to, I've been to quite a few live shows, and the absolute worst one was WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans. We were there like in the Superdome from
7
about
hours.
3:30 till about past 11. And I am a huge wrestling fan.
I have a friend that went to that.
And I was like, we got to go, man. Like it's awful. It's just no.
They were like crippled up trying to get out of the chair. They'd been there so long.
Oh my god!
And you can't sustain your energy for that long. Like
Right.
I've gone back and I still watch. I mean, I watch old wrestling all the time still, just as entertainment. Last week I watched In Your House 13 just because I'd got a tweet saying that 25 years ago today China debuted, and I was like, I'd like to go back and watch that. So I went back and watched that, and sure enough, it's when she comes up, she chokes out not Medusa,
Marlena.
Yeah, Marlena, and then just they take her away. But that pay-per-view was like 2 hours and 17 minutes. And it was just packed with goodness. Like, but all of them back then were like 2 hours, 2:20.
Yeah.
But they didn't It wasn't like Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
did you watch
like
the Royal Rumble? I have to just say this. I have to say this.
did.
Okay, so we were there. We were in San Antonio, and that mother effing Hardy concert at 10:30 at night. Whenever you're there live and you go through the entire card, and then you're waiting on the last match. I'm not a Kevin Owens fan, but I did like Roman Reigns. I was ready to see what was going to happen with Sami Zayn. And right before the main event, they just completely deconstruct the ring, set up a little concert venue, have this fake Kid Rock dude come out, sing a song. Everybody booed him because we were ready to go. We've been there for 4 hours at that point, and then they have to take it all down. And I don't know what because I didn't go back and watch that particular portion on the broadcast. I went and watched the ending of it. The ending of the last match, but I don't know what you saw on the broadcast, but that's what's happening now. Like when before it was just boom, 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 couple of pyrotechnics, no big Titantron. All you needed was people's music. They walked 10 feet to the ring, and you could have 20 matches, and you could have
now they're walking 2 blocks from the.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Hey, whenever we went, okay, I've been to 2 Royal Rumbles. They're both in San Antonio. This last one, they changed up the way that it looked, so they actually could run to the ring. The one in 2017 when we went to, they put the ring right in the middle, and it was so far away that they had a golf cart, and you never saw this at all on the broadcast, but they had a golf cart that the people would get on the back of, and they would drive them to the ring.
That's how WrestleMania 3 was. They had the golf cart.
Wow.
But the Big Show was in that Royal Rumble, and we all still remember it to this day because we see his big ass get on the back of that golf cart, and the golf cart goes.
It's pulling up.
Yeah, and if you go back and you watch that broadcast and you watch how long it took for him to be announced to whenever he got into the ring and the next person to be announced, it was literally 15 seconds.
Wow.
It was dumb. It was stupid. But anyway, I digress. Yeah. So anyway, this was yours.
Wow.
I kind of hijacked that.
It's your third pick. Mine was the Hell in a Cell
his.
2019.
Let me ask you real quick though before we move. We'll get to yours. What 4 pay-per-views would you keep? Royal Rumble, WrestleMania,
the big 4.
SummerSlam, and
Survivor Series.
But
that's what I grew up on.
Okay. What were the Royal Rumbles in January?
Yeah.
April is roughly
right.
WrestleMania.
August.
August is SummerSlam,
and then Thanksgiving, November,
and Thanksgiving, summer. Okay.
But I like the Survivor Series that I grew up with, which, thankfully last year they did the War Game stuff, which was a little bit, better in my opinion, because I just liked the, 4-on-4, you have a team,
Yeah.
Maybe there's not many storylines or,
I think the problem with doing that now is everything is more storyline driven. You see everybody on TV all the time.
Right.
So with that, you saw the entire roster. As opposed to you don't get to see the roster once a week on Superstars. And
yeah, that was before Raw and before SmackDown.
Yeah, so it made it more interesting because you're like,
that's a good point.
wow, the Barbarians here or whoever, as
Yeah.
opposed to, oh wow, it's the Miz again.
And again.
And again.
And again.
It's
a good point. Real good point.
All right, your final pay-per-view.
All right, my final pay-per-view is WrestleMania 10. Because the main event between Yokozuna and Bret Hart, to me, was just not good.
Right.
I like both of them greatly, but for me, the reason why that main event stands out as bad is because two of my favorite matches of all time are on that undercard.
Shawn and Razor.
Yeah, the ladder match, and then Bret versus Owen. Like, the Bret versus Owen is one of the best technical matches that I've ever seen in my life. You know, Owen Hart was my number one on the list that I didn't get to say of people that didn't get their potential, even though he worked really hard for over a decade, and but they didn't know what to do with him. They squandered him, but the dude had such good talent. And Bret Hart. If I made a list of like my favorite 10 wrestlers, I don't know if Bret Hart would even be on it. Maybe he might be kind of towards the end, right? But I don't think I've ever seen a better wrestler than Bret Hart. That just gets it, that understands, ring psychology,
The ins and outs,
everything. That, was a consummate professional, that was safe, that everybody trusted, that could tell a story in the ring, that was one of the best mat wrestlers I've ever seen. Just his pedigree and his family, and he worked really, really hard. My favorite Bret Hart is the heel turn Bret Hart. I love the Hart Foundation from like 96, 97. I felt like there was a lot of truth in that. But I digress as far as that is concerned. But with WrestleMania 10, Bret... I want to say Bret and Yokozuna. I think they both had wrestled early because Luger had to wrestle Yokozuna.
No.
Or something happened where
I don't think Yoko worked twice. I think Bret worked twice.
But so that was after the Royal Rumble where both Luger and Bret won.
Yeah.
And tied. So then they had. I think didn't they both have a crack at Yokozuna?
I can't remember. I know that pay-per-view was. I wouldn't think it was. I thought the whole pay-per-view was kind of lackluster. That was Crush against Savage, and Savage couldn't get Crush's legs tied up for the finish, and it was just real scrambled eggs.
No, it was a bad time for wrestling because it was 94, and I agree with that. I just think those two other matches for me mean so much to me.
Just because there's two pillars of wrestling.
Right.
I mean,
that ladder match it's just, what can you say about that thing? Even though when you look at it now, it's kind of tame. I was a Shawn Michaels fan, and he lost.
Back then, it was something new.
But I was a Razor fan, too.
Different. It pioneered to the
did.
next level.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot you can say about that, and I don't, so I get it. And I know the match you're talking about, and but of course I wasn't watching wrestling back then, but because of all these, behind the scenes, did you know of, you get to see all these wrestling ones again.
They're going to, they always bring that up.
But that's a good point you brought up earlier before we get out here. That why don't they cut the pay-per-views, having one every month, kind of, especially now that's on a network.
I think
you don't need
the fact that they look at it as though it's a monopoly of it. Like
But
they're
can
there.
can they keep the stories
back in
going?
the day, pay-per-views,
No.
you would, if you were in Philly for the pay-per-view, you might be in Cleveland the next night. Now WWF almost stretches things out. If they have a pay-per-view, they may have.
You could drive from Cleveland to get there and still
you
miss.
may have it in the
pay-per-view.
same venue, or you may have it in a stadium, the pay-per-view, and then the arena show gets it the next night. So they don't have. There's not this schedule like the wrestlers used to have to. I mean, they were on the road all the time, and now it's just not that way. And I think it reflects as far as like the product and how tight the show is. They just don't have the product doesn't have the competition. Like you had more viewers. Like
no, I agree with that lack of.
And the pay per view, you had to get off of at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever you had to cut. It's time to go. That's it. I mean,
Sometimes
we paid for this time, and now you're just we can go all night.
Now we're doing concerts in the middle of the before the main event.
Oh my gosh! Don't even.
All right. Well, hey, listeners out there, tell us what were your picks for greatest pay-per-views that had a terrible main event. And would you like to come back next week?
Can I?
Sure. On Princes of the Universe. See how I did that? It's kind of neat. Oh, the mic's still on.